Well, the Supreme Court just stopped the Democrats from being racist, and I just can't stop chuckling to myself. All this time, the Democrats have been saying that the GOP, the Republicans, the right wing, that Trump, that they were going to take voting rights away from minorities and females, and it never seemed like that was what was happening, despite all of the promises that the left wing made, all of the terror that they tried to spread, the fear mongering that they performed, saying that, well, you won't be able to vote if you're black, you're not going to be able to vote if you're a woman, you won't be able to mail in, and it never seemed to happen. Just like all of their fear mongering about being gay, where they were suggesting that Trump was going to send out the Hells Angels to drive around America on their Harleys with a gaydar in one hand and an AR-15 in the other, hunting down the rainbows, but that never happened. And here we are. The prophecy has been fulfilled. Trump really has stopped the black people from voting, but not really, actually. The Democrats fulfilled their own prophecy by making a racial-based gerrymandering for Louisiana. They gerrymandered the crap out of it, so this giant blue swath for the districts 2 and 6 is over 50% black voting age population, and the salmon pink, which is it's less than 50% black. I mean, presumably that's salmon pink because 255 red and blue is very harsh on the eyes when side by side. But yeah, the blue, which is just a weird scar down the middle of Louisiana, it's not just, I mean, it's like the land doesn't vote meme. It's like major cities and such that they've done this for. So you can see New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Shreveport. They've tried to connect the dots here and get most of the black people in those districts so that they can fudge the vote to the left, which is something they think is definitely going to happen because they think that Democrats, they think that black people will definitely vote for the Democrats, and they think that because the Democrats, they actively attempt to terrorize and bribe minorities. But I'll get into that a bit later. So first, there's this Mark Morial guy, the president of the Urban League, who says that it feels like a betrayal. And he go on to quote Justice Alito, who argued that the vast social change, particularly in the South, made such considerations of the past, of the voting rights and racial discriminations and such, no longer necessary. But Mr. Morial said that such reasoning did not reflect the realities of people's lived experiences in 2026. Lived experiences is an excuse, by the way. It's a lie. It's a nothing burger. It's like saying reproductive rights or women's health. It's not a real thing. It's just a spell. And he went on to say, that's illogical when racially polarized voting in the South is real, when the racial wealth gap, the educational achievement gap, and the health outcome gaps are real, when discrimination claims in employment are still rampant. And discrimination claims is much like saying lived experiences. It's just a claim, not actually the truth. But racially polarized voting in the South is real. Isn't that what you want, though? Like, don't you want them to vote Democrat? You're fine with the Democrats gerrymandering the situation for black people to vote for the Democrats, right? Like, isn't that what you want for the Democrats to win because of racism? And then the wealth gap, the education gap, the health outcome gap. So white people are forcing black people to eat unhealthy food. White people are keeping black people out of the libraries and preventing them from going to school and preventing them from using their phones to look things up on the internet. White people are preventing them from having better jobs. No, I think the lack of education is doing that, and the lack of education is their own fault, isn't it? It's always finger pointing with these people. Cutting to another story, and when I say these people, I mean Democrats. Cutting to another story, a quote from a Lee Epstein, which is a unfortunate name, especially because they're apparently a girl, and Lee, I've never heard a girl named Lee before, but there is no center now, said political science professor Lee Epstein, who performed the analysis with her Washington University colleague Andrew DeMartin and Michael J. Nelson of Penn State. A yawning gulf has opened between the left and right flanks of the court, Epstein said. The polarization of American society seeps into the Senate, it seeps into the presidency, it is naturally going to seep into the courts. It would be surprising to see another John Paul Stevens, which is another terrible name, Epstein said, referring to the late justice noted for his moderation. Partisan identity and ideology have become so intertwined. Yes, I mean, they've always been intertwined, it's just now they're hyperbolic, and the reason for that is because the left wing ramped everything up. It was the left wing who doused the Constitution in kerosene and lit the match. Like, no one else was pushing crazy ass politics. And let's just keep on with that, shall we? They immediately do what Democrats do, which is they think the world started when white people came over to the USA and took it over from the natives, right? And then that was evil. And then the USA got more evil when it enslaved people from Africa. And then it got a little bit better during the Civil War and the Emancipation Proclamation. That was also good. And then World War II, the USA had finally redeemed itself. But now we're slipping back into the dark times. Now we're going back to the times where women had no rights. They're literally slaves because they can't abort their children. And where black people are literal slaves, I guess, because they think this is now the Confederacy. So they're going back to 1950s, citing things about school segregation and voting rights and the rights of criminal defendants. And immediately after that, they skip all the way to civil rights about gay and transgendered people, saying that the court has ruled against them. Last year, the justices upheld a Tennessee ban on gender transition treatment for minors and allowed religious parents to remove their children from school lessons using LGBTQ books. Oh my God, the atrocity. Well, in 2023, the justices said a website designer's First Amendment rights allowed her to refuse to create sites for same-sex marriages. Yeah, I remember Reddit crashing out over that. They didn't force a website designer to make a same-sex wedding site. Wow, that really is like the end times, isn't it? The USA should just be nuked off the map. They say that Trump was the first president since Ronald Reagan to select 3 justices, giving him an outsized role in shaping the court. But maybe that was a necessity because of how badly the left wing had screwed the pooch. In March, the court ruled against a Colorado law banning conversion therapy for gay and transgender minors, casting doubt on similar laws in nearly 30 states. During arguments in January, the majority also seemed inclined to allow states to ban transgender people from girls' and women's sports. Again, this is the dark times you people are talking about. Just to be clear, this is the evil stuff you're talking about. Gerrymandering in and of itself is evil. It's racist. Like it's done with the explicit purpose of being racist or sexist or something along those lines. It always has been. And now, I mean, it feels like people say gerrymandering so much that you might not even realize that it's just like an instinctively bad thing or a naturally bad thing. Well, it's not natural at all, I guess. I don't know. Is racism natural? I suppose it kind of is in a way. But the fascinating thing is that they're saying this as if like black people need to vote differently than white people, right? But that's not really the case, is it? Like black and white people don't just automatically vote differently from one another simply because of their skin color. So why exactly would the Democrats be suggesting that black people need to vote Democrat and that's some sort of like oppression if they can't? Well, that would be because the Democrats, as I mentioned earlier, they operate on a terrorizing and bribery system. This is how they've gotten so much power. They terrorize, we'll save black people for last. They terrorize the brown people by saying that they are going to be kicked out of the country, right? Like even if they're a legal citizen, they're going to be kicked out of the country. So that's their terror. And the bribe is telling them that no one can be illegal on stolen land. You don't even need a green card. You're our neighbor. Automatically, everyone can come to the USA. You talk about gay people, and they offer like gay marriage or whatever, but the fear, the terrorization. I think I mentioned earlier the Hell's Angels. That's basically that. The transgender people is like, well, remember when you were in school and you were transgendered as a 5-year-old, and everyone was like, no, Timmy, you're actually a boy. It's like, so that's never going to happen anymore, right? Because we're going to take care of the kids now. We're going to get all those 5-year-olds their puberty blockers and their double mastectomies. And that's the bribery. That's the terrorization. Women, needless to say, they're terrorized by saying that a man is going to SA you and that you are going to die in childbirth. But the bribery, abortion. No questions asked abortions, up to term. And there it is again, like the most heinous thing of all. If you can promise someone that they're allowed to snuff out their child, even when it's like a day before it's born, then you can promise them anything. And with black people, the terror is white supremacy, right? Whatever it even means, because obviously they think it means everything, even down to the food that they eat, the education that they have. They believe that white supremacy controls every single aspect of their lives, even though there are plenty of places in the South, places in Georgia that have well over 90% of the people living there in the cities and the towns are black. So, like, no one's there except for black people, really? And so anything that happens to them is basically their own fault. And yet, still, it somehow is white supremacy. And, I mean, there's something to be said as well of that, of, like, it's basically, like, the former slave states are turning into a massive enclave, which is just pumping out ghetto culture and such, and even black people hate ghetto culture these days. I mean, it's gotten a bit crazy, but the problem is the democracy. Like, it's not even just the gerrymandering. It's the democracy itself. The Democrats. It's not really the democracy, but the Democrats. They're just terrorizing all of these different groups, making them terrified of white people, of men, of the Republican Party, thinking that all these crazy things are going to happen to them when they haven't been happening, and they're not happening. What's happening now is not racism. Well, they tried to, but the Supreme Court struck it down. And somehow this is them weakening voting rights. Like, it's the same thing as they said when they said, well, if the GOP takes over, you're not going to be able to vote because you're a woman and you have to get your passport, which is hard to do because you took your husband's last name. It's like, what? But loads of women can do that. And Bernie Sanders sitting there saying, well, I don't have my birth certificate. Well, how the hell would I get it? I don't even know. Really? You're worth millions of dollars. You don't know how to get your birth certificate. That's interesting. A celebrity politician in the most powerful country in the world. You don't know how to get your birth certificate. Well, maybe you should look into that. I think it might be important to know, considering that you're like 90. Anyway, I just wanted to mention how this isn't really just about the gerrymandering. It's about the Democrats' policies and how they act about things. They terrify people and they bribe them, which this is very different from what the Republicans do. The Republicans promise the country things. They promise the country that it's going to be made great again. They promise a good economy. They promise better health, like they flipped the food pyramid or whatever. All the promises regarding fluorides and vaccines and stuff. I don't know anything about like that. I'm not going to pretend I'm some sort of genius regarding that. But they've promised so many things. Needless to say, getting the illegal immigrants out of the country. All of these promises are not for a person. They're not for white people. They're not for men. They're for Americans, right? So then why is it that the Democrats are promising things to black people and gay people and trans people and women? But those aren't really for the sake of the country, are they? They're for the sake of the person. They're personal promises. They're bribes. And that's the way I look at it. Bribes and terrorism. That is the Democratic Party. I'm sure I could have said that in a more like eloquent way, but my throat's getting a bit hoarse. I think I'm getting sick. So I'm going to cut it there. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please do the YouTube things.